Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Social Flight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such a fun and amazing show for you this evening. Aaron Fitzgerald is here of Red Bull Air Force, the Red Bull Air Force. He's their helicopter pilot, and we're going to get started with him in just a minute. Before we get started, as always, just a few housekeeping notes. First of all, we are seeing such wonderful activity happening on socialflight.com and the SocialFlight mobile apps. We were just at a great fly-in over at Crow Island here in Stowe, Massachusetts, and there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events happening. Actually, even that's an underestimate. It is thousands that we have in SocialFlight all the time. And so be sure to get out there. Go to a pancake breakfast, go to a fly-in, an antique fly-in, a car show, any of these things that are happening, combining aviation, cars, and so many other things at airports all around the country. We need to support general aviation. That is why we created SocialFlight, and it's just wonderful to see so many people coming together. And of course, we travel to as many as we can. If you spot us there, chances are we have a little bit of swag to hand you as well, because I'm just so appreciative of all of you taking time out of your evening and supporting general aviation, not just here on the show, but with everything that you do. When you get out there and you fly, you just help everything. And when you do that, we also have the SocialFlight Fly to Win Challenge. The Fly to Win Challenge gives you points anytime you fly. When you go to a new airport, you get points. You check in on the app. You need the app in order to do that, but it's very simple. And we are giving away our next prize is September 1st. It's a Lightspeed Zulu 3 headset. So there is still time to get into that drawing just by getting the SocialFlight mobile app and checking in anywhere on the Fly to Win Challenge. Now, if you have ever watched an air show, you know the feeling of watching aircraft do things that just seem to defy the laws of physics. But Aaron Fitzgerald takes that to a whole new level while piloting BO 105 helicopter as part of the Red Bull Air Force. Aaron's an ATP-rated helicopter pilot with more than 9,000 flight hours. He built his career focusing on film and television productions, has worked on countless movies and shows. He's also worked as the aerial coordinator for several world record aviation projects, and his ongoing work includes utility flying, offshore support, and flight test programs for NASA and Lockheed Martin. And if that were not enough, Aaron also flies the UH-60 Blackhawk on firefighting contracts with the Forest Service, battling forest fires in the Western United States. We all know how important that is. I'm going to bring Aaron on the line now to join us here. Please help me welcome to SocialFlight Live, Aaron Fitzgerald. How are you doing, Aaron?
Hey, Jeff. Hey, everybody.
You know, I love to get started with your backstory. I'm in awe. We just got back from Oshkosh, so saw your performance there. You did 3 days there. And oh my, I mean, there's just so many questions, but I want to start with your background, what actually got you into this and how you got started, because it's fascinating to me.
Well, I wasn't raised in an aviation family, so I had to kind of find my own way in. A lot of us in the aviation industry now, many people were born into it or had family members that kind of helped them along the way. And that wasn't really my story. I come from a small town in Washington State called Wenatchee, and I not only was I not related to any pilots, but I didn't really know any until about high school. So while it was something that I always wanted to do, I wasn't real sure what the first steps were. Until I started talking to that teacher. His name was Mr. Griffiths, and he was great. He was a helicopter pilot. He flew in the Army, and he was a science teacher, and he adapted the private pilot curriculum into a science class and called it aerodynamics and weather. So without knowing it, I took the private pilot ground school as a science credit in high school, and I got to fly with him. That was my first experience in a plane, and that's kind of how it all started. And then I had a slightly circuitous route for a couple of years. Ended up in the Army when the Gulf War broke out. I joined the Army. I was in the 82nd Airborne. Didn't actually make it to the war, though. They sent me to Korea. So I joined because of the war, but by the time I finished training and all that, they didn't need us over there, so they sent me somewhere else. And when I got out, that's when I started flying. So little segue into how the delay, but that's how I started flying. Is when I got out, I used the Army College Fund and went right to flight school, and pretty much have flown almost every day since then.
Oh my, that's fascinating. And I mean, you mentioned how your high school teacher made all the difference in the world to you. And first of all, I'm impressed that anyone was able to create a high school curriculum that involved aerodynamics and weather. That's pretty cool in itself.
It was amazing. I mean, what a great and fortuitous opportunity for somebody like me who had no other connections or no idea at all how to get into aviation. And here was the pathway for it, and it just was something that kind of fell in my lap. I mean, of course, I pursued that class. I had heard about it. I wanted to sign up for it as soon as I could. But the fact that he was doing that, I don't know how many people that went through that class became pilots later, but I certainly did. If you can help one, they say, then it's worth it. So there's at least one who benefited from that class, and that was me.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I love about one thing I definitely love about aviation is that it seems it's very inclusive. We are always looking to make more pilots. All you need to do is talk to one, and they'll drag you in one way or another. And your story also speaks to me because I also grew up like no connection to aviation. Family knew nothing about it, no pilots, and didn't even know where the local airport probably was for the nearest GA. And same concept in terms of it takes someone. It wasn't until after college someone went and I just happened to be working with someone who's a private pilot. So reaching out, having that be part of your life, I think that's really important. So it's a wonderful story that it was a high school teacher that did that for you. When you joined the military, was there any part of that had to do with flying, or what? I mean, how did that in terms of why, what brought you in and what you wanted to do? Because you wound up, of course, jumping as part of the 82nd Airborne. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wanted the war was going on, so I wanted to get going as soon as possible. And so the only combat arms job that was available at that time at the recruiting station where I was artillery. So I ended up joining the artillery. My MOS was artillery, and then I ended up in the 82nd Airborne. And I was only in for, they had a 2-year contract, so I only served that 2-year contract. They do that sometimes during wartime, or if they need to bolster the enlistment rate, they'll offer a shorter contract. So in that time, I did put together the warrant officer flight packet, but I wasn't organized at that age enough to get that turned in on time or whatever, and then my enlistment ran out. So I ended up being a civilian pilot, and it's worked out great. I'm really happy that there was another avenue for me. It would have been cool to be a warrant officer and fly in the Army, but that's not how I did it. I followed a different path altogether.
So tell me about the transition. First of all, from how you said you used the Army bill to go and get your pilot's license, and then how'd you find your way in terms of helicopters? Was that something always as a kid, or did that just evolve?
That was my only interest. I didn't even fly fixed wing until much later. I was only focused on flying helicopters. And when I say I went to flight school, I went and trained in helicopters from the very beginning. I flew helicopters for a good 20 years before I even started flying airplanes. That's just the only thing I was focused on was helicopters. So I gravitated just toward that.
That's fascinating, because I think almost every helicopter pilot I've ever met went through fixed wing to get there. I don't know many that actually started there. That's really interesting. Can you reflect on, having done that later, whether that affected your views on like how to fly or what's involved in it? I mean, you certainly got really good at pedals.
Yeah, helicopter pilots turn out to be really good tailwheel pilots later on when you go to learn that. But for me, because I was only focused on helicopters, and that I knew that's what I wanted to do, even though you can save money by training in airplanes first, they're a little bit less expensive. So everyone always counsels you to do that. Get your fixed wing, then add the helicopter rating on later, which makes sense if you're going to fly both or whatever. But I knew I was only going to fly helicopters, and I didn't have a lot of money. I had no money. I had some financial assistance from the Army College Fund, but I still had to come up with a lot of it myself. So because I had a limited amount of funds, I knew that I needed to focus only on what I wanted to do, and that was helicopters. So as you all know, the private pilot requirements are 40 hours before you can take the check ride. So I was so focused and so strapped for cash that when I landed from my private pilot check ride, I had 40.9 hours in my logbook. the was the check ride. So I didn't have any money to spare. I didn't want to waste any time or any effort. I was tremendously focused on what I was doing because I was limited. So I didn't really have a choice.
Wow, that's really interesting. And what helicopters did you were you training on?
Well, I started in an R-22, the little
Okay.
two-seat trainer that most new helicopter pilots today train on that same one. It's a great little helicopter for what it is. It's inexpensive, and for that reason, there are a lot of helicopter pilots out there who are all rated and have their license because of that helicopter, because it brought the cost of training down.
Yeah, and my understanding is it's kind of it basically teaches you the hardware. You learn a lot. You don't exactly have, I guess, a governor or things like that. Is
Well,
it true
now
that
they
it
have governors, so you just add power and it automatically does it for you. But when I was learning how to fly Robinsons, there were no governors, so you had to manage the throttle with the twist grip like the old days. So that's good training. That really teaches you what you're asking of the helicopter when you're asking for more horsepower. You tend to be a little gentler and a little smoother when you're managing the rotor RPM yourself, because it's a very low rotor inertia system. So it's pretty unforgiving, and the rotor RPM decays very rapidly if you let it. So you have to be very attentive, and I think it was a great trainer then. It's a great trainer now. Now they use governors, a little safer, but still a great trainer.
help people who aren't really familiar with helicopters understand some of those basics, because in an airplane you have this idea of the power curve, which is just about energy and inertia. But when you are doing what you just described, when you are manually controlling power to the rotors and the engine RPM, it's a bigger dance about what happens if you get behind a curve, and the helicopter will just kind of basically fall if it doesn't have that ability. Like what?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So the power available is the same. The power curve you were talking about. It's when you slow down and you come out of what's called translational lift, then you need more horsepower. So the slower you get below that VY speed, the more power you need to add to maintain altitude. So when you're in a hover on a hot day at max gross weight, you're using a lot of power, almost maximum power, maximum continuous power, just to hover, particularly when you're out of ground effect. So it's just a transition from one phase of flight to another. The airplane doesn't have that hover mode. Well, some do. Kevin Coleman and Kirby Chambliss can do it. But
Yeah,
when you're
exactly. Yeah, they can do it.
Yeah, you're generating your own lift instead of using airflow over the wings. Obviously, you're spinning the wings around, so it just takes more horsepower when you're stationary.
Yeah, I think where I got was kind of a little experiences when I was given early on a chance to try to take off and hover an Enstrom that had no governor, and they were explaining that red arc and that kind of concept of just the hovering part, that if you don't keep your engine RPMs up to a certain point, you can't kind of overcome that. So kudos to you, because I've seen people with you get the marble on the table and you're trying to practice what's involved in flying a helicopter, and it is not easy.
Yeah, it's only in the beginning that it feels like that. A lot of fixed wing pilots they don't like helicopters because maybe they tried it and it wasn't natural to them. And no matter how good of an airplane pilot you are and how natural you are, almost nobody can hover a helicopter on their first try. I've seen a couple of people do it. It's very rare. It just takes some time to push through that. So instead of going around hating on helicopters because they're hard to fly, just push through that first couple hours and you'll see that there's the same as flying an airplane. It's easy once you learn it, but it is difficult in the beginning stages for sure. There's a lot more happening.
I'll find a way to meet up with you at some point so you can prove that to me, and I can be the advocate of no, it's not that hard. So tell me a little bit about once you got through your training, did you know what you wanted to do with helicopters? Because of course that world is all about business. It's all those, helicopters for the most part are working vehicles.
For sure. It's a different sector of aviation. Not a lot of hobbyists flying around in helicopters because they're just so darn expensive. There are a very few, a small number of people who can afford to just go goof around in a helicopter on their own dime. I am not one of those people. So I've always had to work as a helicopter pilot. But the answer to how I got into what I'm doing, I was working line service at Santa Monica Airport while I was, finishing my training, and I was a super low time pilot, brand new license. But there were a few helicopters that were based at that airport, and it's a beautiful airport, Santa Monica. I hope they save it, but it doesn't look good. But it's an airport where you can stand on the runway and see the ocean, and there's a breeze blowing off the water every day. Southern California, it's amazing. But I worked there, and I was, and I noticed that one of the helicopter operators flew more than all the other helicopters combined. This one helicopter was just flying constantly. So like a magnet, I was drawn to that helicopter, and they were a news helicopter operation. So I weaseled my way into a job there, which was pretty funny because every day, I was working line service and I'd be over at their hangar and I'd be buffing the hangar floor for, no pay, just on my own dime. And they'd go, "Hey, we don't have a job for you, man. We're not going to hire you." And I'd go, "Okay, I get it. That's cool. I'll see you tomorrow." And then they'd come in tomorrow and I'd be washing one of their cars, "Dude, we told you there's no job for you." Like, "Oh yeah, I know. That's cool. I get it. I'll see you tomorrow." And I did that every day until they finally needed somebody. And then it was like, "Oh man, I guess we can hire this guy who's been cleaning everything." And so that's how I got my first job. But what I discovered at that job was that I really like flying camera systems, and solving the creative challenge of trying to put the camera in the right place, using the helicopter as kind of a dolly to help the mission of getting the shot. And even though we were shooting news, that basic fundamental skill is what kind of translated later on into making movies and the things I do now. But I discovered that love for flying cameras by doing it. That was not my ambition. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew is I wanted to fly, which is still my ambition. I want to fly every day, but I found that I really love that side of it. So I pursued that further, and sought out as much of that type of work as I could. And that's a big part of how I make my living now, is making film and television.
Wow. So how does the news helicopter, basically being your first chance out the gate, how does that crew work? Because you start at this job and you're told to go places, but I assume you've got someone trying to direct you to shots that then you've got to figure out, is that safe? How do I get there? How do I get to whatever I need to do? Tell me a little bit behind the scenes on that.
It's collaborative, and it's fast paced, because you got to figure everything out that you just said, as fast as possible, because it's a race. You want to be the first ones on the air. So it was a good kind of a pressure cooker, learning how to interact with all these different skills all together at one time. But to break it down, in a news helicopter, there's essentially three jobs going on. There's a pilot, a camera operator, and a reporter. And oftentimes one person is doing two of those jobs. So in the old days, all the pilots were the reporter, and then there was a camera operator in the back seat. And then not recently, but that kind of evolved, and now a lot of the camera operators are reporters. So usually there's two people on board, sometimes three, but there are three jobs happening. So someone's either wearing two hats, or there are three people on board. So whatever the mixture is, and I did all three of those jobs at different times. So I was a cameraman reporter, and I was also a pilot reporter, it's evolved to where it's a little safer probably to have the camera operators reporting. So most of them, that's how they do it. But when I started, it was all pilot reporters.
Wow. So when you're hovering up there, are you also manipulating the camera in many ways, or are you at least seeing what the shot is while you're doing that?
For sure, yeah. Whoever's flying is doing everything they can to get the camera itself. Everyone's kind of working for the camera, so you're trying to get it to where it needs to be, and that's similar with making movies or television shows, whatever you're doing. The helicopter is just you're the dolly grip. You're moving the camera around to where it needs to be to get the right angle. So in a news situation, you need to be able to tell the story. You need to get the obstacles out of the way, trees, buildings, mountains, things like that. So you have to move around and get the best possible shot and figure out what that is to tell the story. And for someone to be able to look at the screen and see what's going on without any audio, and then vice versa. You want to report well enough to where if they close their eyes, they can still visualize what you're showing them. So that's the holy grail, to be able to do both of those things perfectly at the same time.
That's amazing. Have you ever had any kind of close calls in those situations?
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I did it for 9 years, so you see a lot. But no,
anything you can tell us about, even if the names are protected?
Oh, well, yeah, I saw some people do some questionable things, but no, the scary ones are if you get closer to another aircraft unintentionally, what you would call a near miss, which those are. Anyone who's come very close to another aircraft in the air and had a near miss, it can tell you, and we've all had that experience to some degree or another, but you're not scared when it happens, because it happens so fast. The first thing that you feel is exhilaration that you're still alive. So you generally, both people start laughing in the helicopter and go, "Whoa, man, that was close." And then you figure out what happened and who did what wrong and why that happened, and try to never do that again.
Is in such a congested area, of course, as Southern California, where you live and spend a lot of time working, I can imagine that that whole world is a race to a destination in many cases, like you mentioned. Is is there an issue with having multiple aircraft all trying to get at the same kind of shot? Is that part of it, or is it just more random en route stuff?
Uh, the closest call I had was when we were working at night underneath the ILS on an airport. So I got a close up look at a Gulf Stream one night. But generally, the news crews and anyone who does that in any city can tell you it's very, very collaborative. All the pilots are talking to each other. You know, you look up from the ground and you see in LA there might be 6 or 7 helicopters over one thing. So it looks you know, exciting from the ground, but everybody's talking to each other. Everybody's in a position at an altitude that they've discussed over the radio or predetermined before they went there. So it's very safe, and everybody does a really good job of keeping it safe, even in super congested airspace like Los Angeles.
Wow. What about the different, so what kind of helicopters were you flying at the news time, first of all?
Primarily the AS-350, what we call the A-Star here in the States. They call it the Squirrel everywhere else in the world. But the vast bulk of what we did, the news that I did, and this was a long time ago. I stopped doing that a long time ago. So it's all changed now. But I flew Jet Rangers actually too a little bit. So Jet Rangers and A-Stars.
Wow. And then what did you evolve to next? Like what took you into some of the other side? Was it straight, did you go straight from there into the kind of entertainment business side of it, or did that involve some of the other things you've done of utility work?
Yeah, the career arc has always been kind of one full-time job and then a bunch of part-time work outside of that as well. So while I was doing news, I was doing some other types of production, some movies and commercials and stuff like that on a sporadic basis. But then I transitioned from the full-time news job into a full-time utility job, flying 500s and A-Stars up in the mountains on power line projects, and that was amazing. I really, really loved that. I got to do that for 8 or 9 years as well. And while I was doing that, I was also continuously working part-time, doing production work on the side. And then a number of years ago, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, I pretty much transitioned full-time into production flying, just film and television work.
Wow. And have you seen an evolution of that in that? Because obviously you're saying it's only 10-year period, so that's not necessarily vast. But I know we had Treat Williams on the show talking about some of the things that he's done in his movies where they were like, from the sounds of it, just randomly mounting places. People were literally just going to be standing and fighting with Archall or others. Inside aircraft. I'd imagine it's insanely choreographed at this point now.
Yeah, I have been doing it full time for about 10 years, so there's been a little evolution there. But I have my first on-screen credit was in 1999, so I have been around for a while and seen kind of the evolution of it. I don't know Treat personally, but we have a ton of mutual friends, and I've known about him and heard stories about how great he is and everything. So I'm sure I got to go back and watch that episode because I'll bet he's got some good stories. But yeah, it has evolved. It's obviously it gets a little safer every year. Every time there's any kind of an accident or somebody gets hurt, then they make more rules. And so now we have there's a lot of protocols that we use. Obviously, the goal is to keep everybody safe and never have any injuries. But you have to do things that have an element of risk if you're going to create cool stuff on camera. In order to tell the story, you have to do some things that are outside the envelope. So the other evolution is that group of pilots who do that type of work tends to be getting a little smaller every year. So it's a kind of a smaller group, and those guys, because they have all that experience, are the ones who end up getting the bulk of the high end work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely fascinating, and I know you had mentioned that you've been doing quite a bit of that. Do you work in just the helicopter side, or do you also still incorporate fixed wing or UAV or other stuff into your photography and coordination?
I only fly helicopters, but we work with airplanes all the time. I've worked with hot air balloons, all different kinds of airplanes, jets, aerobatic planes, everything. But I only work as a helicopter pilot. I do fly airplanes. I own one, and I love it, and I love flying it. I try to fly something almost every day. But the work I do professionally is all in helicopters.
Wow. And so now, of course, you got into the firefighting side and the utility work, which is a whole different type of helicopter, it would seem, at least from the size.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the basic skill of long lining, having an external load on a line that comes from the utility side is what kind of helped me segue into elements in the production world, slinging camera systems, and sometimes, we've rigged a platform that has stunt people on it and stuff like that. So it's kind of a transferable skill set. And the same with fighting fire, in a utility environment, whether you're fighting fire in a Blackhawk or you're building power lines in a 500, it's kind of the same basic foundational skill set. I came into the Blackhawk much later in life, actually kind of on a crooked route, like it sometimes happens. Doing production TV work, we were using Blackhawks for different TV shows and movies and stuff. So I was around the Blackhawk crew, and we were adding that company. It's called Helinet in Los Angeles. That's you mentioned Kevin LaRosa. I work a lot with him. Kevin LaRosa Jr. He's a big aerial coordinator, and I have him to thank for a lot of the work that I get. We work together quite a bit, and through him and through his company that he works with called Helinet, that's how I got introduced to the Blackhawk. And so I came into the firefighting kind of, I shuffled in from the side because I came in from the production side.
Yeah, we did a really short spot with Kevin out at AirVenture, and he's going to be coming on the show as well. And it, of course, his is in the fixed wing world and all this other coordination. But it must really be fascinating to have kind of the foot in both worlds, to one day be out there fighting fires, another day long lining or doing some utility work, and then next thing you're out doing what we'll get to next with Red Bull.
Yeah, it's cool for me to, the air show side of it is getting to share what we do and what we see with the general public, because whether you're firefighting or whether you're out doing utility or even making a movie on a closed set, you're working kind of in obscurity, especially fighting fire and building power lines. There's nobody around. Nobody sees how good those pilots are. And some of the best flying I've ever seen in my career are utility pilots out there building power lines. It's amazing the level of skill that they bring every single day, for long hours and really mountainous and difficult terrain and difficult conditions out there doing some tremendous work. And nobody sees it. You turn the light switch on, the lights come on. You don't think about all the people up there building those power lines. It's very, very difficult work, and it's very challenging and dangerous. So for me to be able to take some of that and bring it to the public and go fly helicopters at an air show and show people what it can do, that's cool for me. I love having kind of one foot in each world. And I'm just as comfortable in the middle of nowhere with my boots on as I am in front of a crowd at an air show. Both parts of flying are equally rewarding to me, and I enjoy them both.
Wow. What's it like within the helicopter world of switching models, of going up to such different things? Obviously some of it's a normal progression from an R22 to a 44 or something, but you're putting aircraft out there of the Black Hawk and things like that. When you first tackled moving up, what's involved in making that transition?
Well, it's just like moving up in the fixed wing world too. You learn all the systems of the new aircraft, and there's some book work that I don't take to as easily. So that's work for me. I have to really study. You do the ground school, and then you go out and do whatever the transition training is. If it's something small, like if you're moving into a 500 or an A-star, then the transition period is a little shorter. But if you're moving into a Blackhawk or something bigger, there's a lot of civilian Chinooks out there, and 61s and great big helicopters that people are moving up through into larger aircraft, and you work your way through it. It seems impossible at first. When I first started training on the Blackhawk, I was amazed at how complicated that thing is. But the more it comes together for you, the more you study it, the more you learn how to fly it and work it, the more you realize what a masterful piece of engineering that thing is. So it's a fun challenge to kind of move up and move back and forth and fly different aircraft all the time. It's not uncommon to fly a Blackhawk, an A-star, and a BO-105 within 24 hours of each other.
And are there type ratings within the helicopter world, or is it?
Yeah, above 12,500 pounds, anything with a gross weight that meets that criteria or higher, you need a type rating for. So I do have a Blackhawk type rating, but that's the only type rating I have. Everything else falls under that. So
is the Blackhawk the biggest helicopter you've had a chance to fly, even though that's the largest one you're actually rated for, or have you actually flown larger ones?
Nope, that's the biggest one I've ever flown. I got to fly the simulator at Quantico with the Marine One Squadron. A guy I grew up with was one of the Marine One pilots a number of years back. So I got to go there and fly everything they have in the simulator. But in real helicopters, the Blackhawk's the biggest thing I've ever had control of.
Is there anything on your bucket list of aircraft?
It's never ending. I can't make a list that long. I want everything. I want to fly Mustangs. I've always loved the Cobra, you know, the attack helicopters, the things that civilians generally don't get a chance to fly. Those are the things on my bucket list. But it's literally never ending. There's so many planes and helicopters that I would buy if I was rich.
Yeah,
But
you mentioned the Chinook there. I've always wondered what's involved when you start going to two separate rotors and having to do everything separate. I can only imagine.
yeah, I don't know. I'd only be guessing. I've never flown one. I've ridden in them, I've jumped out of them, but never flown one.
So tell me about the path to the big thing. Flying for Red Bull. How do you make that leap?
Uh, the short answer is Red Bull finds you. They don't. You can't apply for the job. The phone just rings and they offer you the job, and that's how it goes. But the path for me, I kind of figured out how it all went. But I was working in film and television, as I mentioned a bunch of times here. But in that capacity, I was working as a vendor to Red Bull. My little production company called Airborne Images was providing helicopter services to Red Bull. So I was shooting their events and dropping skydivers and any helicopter services that they needed in North America. My little company was providing that for Red Bull, which was great because you're at the coolest events and you're at races and you're covering all kinds of cool stuff for them and moving their people around, skydiving, whatever they needed with a helicopter. I was doing that. So while they started their aerobatic program here in the States in 2005, 2006, around there, and that was Chuck Aaron that was flying it. And when he retired at the end of 2015, at that point, I was already a known entity to Red Bull because I had been providing all the ancillary helicopter services surrounding that. And so they offered me the job, and I took it. So that was an amazing phone call, I can tell you that, because it was not my ambition to fly aerobatics. I had never flown aerobatics in airplanes or helicopters, and they offered me the job, and of course they tell you that, well, we'll train you and everything, and the training was amazing. So I have to back up a little bit and tell you how Red Bull's program works. But there is a pilot in Austria. He's a German guy. His name is Rainer Wilke, and he started flying the BO-105 in the German Army in about 1974. And then he became the aerobatic demonstration pilot around 1984, and he did that for a number of years. He was the display pilot in Germany, flying BO-105 aerobatic display sequence for the military. And then he did some work for the manufacturer, which was MBB. So he was pretty well known aerobatic display pilot, Rainer. There was a couple other ones in Germany, but he's the one who started our program. When he got out of the Army, out of the German Army, he went to work for Red Bull and started the aerobatic program. So there are 5 of us now. There have been 6 total in the history of the program, but all of us trained under Rainer. He trained every Red Bull pilot. He trained me, and our chief pilot, Blackie Schwartz, he provided my initial training. I flew with him a little bit, and then I went and did a full aerobatic course and then an advanced course, all with Rainer. The subsequent training was all with Rainer, and it was eye-opening. It's really amazing because I was new to the BO-105 as well, so I was learning a new aircraft and learning aerobatics all at the same time. And it's been a really fun ride, and it's really a huge honor, and it's a tremendous privilege to be on the team and to be able to do what we do and share it with the aviation community. It's just been an unbelievable ride so far.
Wow, that's amazing. Take us inside a little bit of what is involved in when you start to kind of turn everything on its head with what you're learning in that program, because it's got to be a whole lot different than the things you've learned before. Of what you can do and how to do it. Like you said, first of all, it's an aircraft that can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it was built to be able to fly nap of the earth at high speed, and high speed being a relative term, we're talking about helicopters here, so it only goes about 120 knots at max continuous power. So at that speed, they needed to be able to fly nap of the earth and withstand the G-load sweep from, when you pull up over an obstacle, there's a big positive G load there, and then when you dive back under cover, there's a negative G load there. So they needed to build a transmission and a rotor system that was capable of handling that, over and over again. So they designed the BO-105 for that purpose, and then the aerobatics was kind of a happy byproduct. So the German Army guys, there was Charlie Zimmerman, Siggy Hoffman, and then Reiner. Those guys are the ones who developed the program in Germany in this particular helicopter. So learning it was basically for me just an introduction to what those guys had already developed and perfected. So it was interesting to learn, to fly the helicopter upside down, to take it all the way around through a loop and roll it, and to be upside down in a helicopter was a very strange sensation in the beginning. But once you learn how to do it and get comfortable with it and learn how to kind of refine the maneuver and do a better job of it, then they just become maneuvers like any other maneuver you learn, like when you learn how to land or learn engine out procedures or anything else. The aerobatics kind of get to that point too. And then once it becomes a skill that you have kind of mastered, or you can never really perfect it, but you can get better at it, and you can always try, aim for perfection. And the evolutionary process of that is what keeps me motivated. But as you start to build that foundational skill set, then you can try to refine it and bring more energy and make the show better. And that's kind of where I am now. I'm just trying to get almost as good as Reiner. I'm nowhere near as good as he is yet. I'll never get there, but I'm trying. And I make a conscious effort to go. I practice almost every day, and I go out there and just try to do a better job and try to make the show better, and uphold the standard, because it's an honor to have the job, and I don't want to let anybody down.
So amazing. I mean, you make it sound so seamless and fluid to be able to do that and then move into a routine. But I've got to believe that with what you're doing, there's old rules that were like, never get near this envelope, never get near this thing, that now it's like, no. In this case, you blow right past that.
Yeah, I had to unlearn some muscle memory, 20 years of previous helicopter flying, trying to keep the dang things right side up, and then here I am making full control deflections. In a helicopter, you move the cyclic in a circle about this big in the center, and you make very small refined control inputs. But when you're doing aerobatics in a BO-105, we actually go to the stops in the whole left hemisphere. So all the way to the forward stop, the aft stop, everywhere on the left stop. That's something you have to teach your hands and feet to do.
Why the left hemisphere?
Just because of the way the aerodynamics work on that rotor system, and because it rotates in the direction that it does, and the orientation of the tail rotor, and the way it's all set up, that everything works better to the left. So we basically do the whole show to the left. All the rolls are left. Everything, hammerhead's always to the left. And also because you want to use the helicopter's tendencies in your favor. You don't want to fight against it, right? So when in a BO-105, when you add power, it wants to pitch up and roll right. And when you reduce power, it wants to pitch down and roll left. So you use those tendencies to control the roll rate or the pitch rate, whatever you're trying to do. You use your power to your favor and not try to fight it. So everything we do is to the left, and everything we do in the display sequence is well within the performance envelope of the helicopter. There's no exceedances or anything like that. It's all pretty easy on the machine. It's almost impossible to hurt that thing aerodynamically. You can still over-temp it, over-speed it, over-torque it, all the things you can do with a helicopter, but aerodynamically speaking, it's fairly indestructible. It's a great little machine, and it was really well engineered and way ahead of its time.
That's fascinating, and a great Easter egg to everybody who's watching right now. If you're going to see the show through different eyes next time, you look that all the rolls are to the left, because I can tell you, I've seen your show many times. It never occurred to me that they're all in the same roll. The rolls are all in the same direction.
Am I giving away too much information here? I don't want to, know how we make the sausage.
Oh no, it's just no. Are you kidding? You're making like heroes and of everybody who's watching, because they're going to turn to the person next to them at the air show and they're going to go, yeah, I know, Aaron, if you watch this show, you're going to see everything goes to the left. Let me tell you why. It has to do with when you add power, reduce power.
There you go. You can control
the whole thing, right? We're all pilots. Everyone who's on there is going to be a pilot. They're going to know the expertise you're doling out here is making everyone an expert and a hero.
Well, you know what? You think about that. Sometimes when you're flying the display, particularly at a place like Oshkosh, you know that some of the people in the crowd are airshow pilots and aerobatic pilots that have way more skill than I do. So you're really trying to be on your best behavior, thinking, oh my goodness, Kirby Chambliss is down there, Kevin Coleman's watching me, Lee Lauterbach's on the ground. Like, these guys can see me. I have to do perfect or as close as I can.
Yeah, well, you know, Kirby's an awfully nice guy. I don't think he'd be thinking that way.
Well, actually, in his case, he's usually in the air with me. We perform together, so that's a huge honor, a tremendous privilege to fly with him and Kevin Coleman, my two teammates. Those guys, they're unbelievable. They can practically rip the wings off of any aircraft. It's really something to see them fly and to be up, you know, with them. We perform together in the aerobatic box, so that's something that I never take for granted. That's for sure.
I want to see you make a video with the helicopter like he did with the police chasing him and all that other stuff. That was
Oh my
that
goodness,
was,
it's funny that you know that was me in the video, right?
it was.
Yeah, yeah. That was before I had this job, and I was just working as, you know, the production support guy. That was me in the video with really bad acting. I'd like to apologize to everyone who saw that.
Oh, I am gonna watch that video right after the show. No question.
My hair was a little less gray then, but yeah, that was me.
Oh my, that is one of my favorite videos produced. So kudos to you for working on that. That was
Ton of
great.
fun to do that. We got to rip around inside Texas Motor Speedway, and we flew around the fairgrounds and everything. It was really cool. And the production company, that's Red Productions in Dallas, and they did an amazing job. It was a ton of fun, and it's a ton of fun to watch. It's really funny. It's hard to
Yeah,
not
I
watch it.
remember, you know, he was on the show and we talked about the making of that, and that was I just had not connect the dots that that was you. So what a cool coincidence.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Oh man. So first of all, I mean, a lot of people you talk about the BO 105. That, like you said, that goes way back. Are you aware of any other helicopters that have ever been designed to do it, or is that just it? It's that one helicopter.
Oh no, there's a lot of them that'll do it. In fact, there was a parallel program in the United States. Well, let's go back to the very, very beginning. The very first loop that was ever recorded on film was in 1949. It was a Sikorsky test pilot by the name of Tommy Thompson, and he was flying an S-52 with a 245 horsepower Franklin engine, which was horribly underpowered and unreliable by today's standards. But he was out testing, and he had a mechanic with him. And Tommy had been a fighter pilot in the war. He flew P-40s. So he was used to doing rolls, and the mechanic, they were doing all kinds of maneuvering, trying to test this helicopter and ring it out. And the mechanic said, "Do you think it'll do a loop?" And Tommy said, "Sure, I think it will." You know, so they did it, and they did 3 or 4 loops, and then they landed, and then and I read that this is firsthand from him because he wrote it in a book that was unpublished, but I got to read the book, and so this is how he said it went down. But he landed from doing those loops, and the engineers came out and said, "Hey, Mr. Sikorsky would like to see you in his office." And so he did the 1,000-yard walk down the hallway. Oh man, I'm gonna lose my job. I got this great job, and now I'm gonna get fired for doing loops in the helicopter. And he walked in, and Igor Sikorsky said, "Hey, was that you doing loops in my helicopter?" And Tommy said, "Yeah, sir, that was me. I'm sorry." And he goes, "No, no. Do you think you can do it at a lower altitude so that we can film it?" So he said, "Sure." So they went out that same day. They went out and Tommy did a whole bunch of loops at really low altitude. And if you can Google it right now and watch it on YouTube. It's still up. It's Tommy Thompson first helicopter loop Sikorsky. Just put that combination in, you'll see it. But he was doing loops in that little underpowered helicopter, entering at like 40 feet AGL. Incredible. So he was the first. Tommy Thompson was the guy who started it all, as far as we can all prove. But to answer the question, the BO-105 is not the only one, and there have been parallel programs in the United States too. There's a guy named Rich Lee who was a test pilot at Hughes and Boeing, and he developed the Apache. So he was one of the main test pilots when they were developing the Apache system. So he did a full aerobatic routine in the Apache, and he traveled all around the world showing it off at air shows when they were trying to sell it to other countries. So he did a full aerobatic display at a mission weight Apache. So they didn't strip it down, they didn't go light fuel, they flew it at mission weight, and he would take a random one off the line. So he wasn't using a modified one or anything. He went out at a really heavy weight, like 16 or 18,000 pounds. I'm not sure. I'm not an Apache pilot. I don't know. But he, for many years, he performed in an Apache. And then he also, in his capacity working for Hughes, he performed in a 500 and I think even a 300. But he and 4 other test pilots were on the first statement of aerobatic competency cards that were issued for helicopters. That was in 1986 or 7, I think. So they were the first ones in the United States to fly aerobatics, legally with the waiver. The card that I have now, the Statement of Aerobatic Competency card, is what all airshow performers have. It allows you to do aerobatics in waivered airspace. But Rich Lee was the first one in the U.S. To do that and to have that card. Him and 4 other Hughes test pilots at that time.
Wow, that is so cool. So it does, even though we're used to seeing it in this one aircraft, there's the 500 and others that can do some of these maneuvers.
The Blackhawk will do it too.
Have you ever been tempted?
The Blackhawk will do it too.
That's awesome. Gonna have the first long lining aerobatic performance.
That I did not do. I've never done anything with it with an external load, and I probably never will. I get asked about that a lot, though.
Yeah, you hold as long as you keep that same 1G and don't turn someone into sausage. If it's a wing walker at the end, then you'd be in good shape.
We do a really cool stunt that Luke Akins and I invented. My teammate Luke Akins is a famous skydiver, and he's the guy who jumped with no parachute from 25,000 feet and landed in a net. You should interview him, by the way. He's amazing. But he and I invented a stunt that we call the roll exit. So there is external load aerobatics, kind of. He starts out on the skid right outside the pilot's window, so he and I are pretty much face to face. And I come into the aerobatic box doing about 90 knots, so he's just barely hanging on there, and he's wearing a parachute, of course. And then I initiate a roll, and then to initiate the roll, you pitch up first, right? So we establish kind of an upward energy, and as we go upward, and I start the loop, or the roll rather, when you roll, now looking nose on, the rolling moment, the axis is the rotor head, so the skids are outside of that axis, so it gives him even a more upward trajectory, so you're imparting more energy on him. So he actually exits the skid as I enter the roll, and we diverge like that. It's really cool. There's a bunch of video of it online if anybody wants to see it. Wow,
and that's called, you said, the roll exit?
Roll exit. I guess you just name it whatever you want when you invent the maneuver. It's pretty exciting. We worked our way into it, of course. In the beginning we were really, really conservative, but we have it now to where the last few we've done, I can actually launch him so he's above the helicopter for a couple seconds. It's really cool.
Oh man, that is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. We're really good friends, so there's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of, almost telepathic communication. We can kind of tell what each other's thinking by looking at their body language, and he knows what I'm going to do, and I know what he's going to do. It's fun developing things like that with people that you know and trust so well.
Oh, I can only imagine. So tell us a little bit about the world of kind of the Red Bull and doing the touring and flying at all these air shows. This got to take you all over the place. And it's also fascinating to me that as opposed to almost everything else I've been exposed to where the performer kind of exists first and finds the sponsor, this is Red Bull that's actually running this.
Yes, like I said earlier, they choose you. So the skydivers that we have on our team are all world champions in one discipline or another. Our 2 fixed wing pilots in the United States, Kirby Chambliss, whose resume is impossible to list. It's so long. 5-time aerobatic national champion, 2-time world champion. Our newest member of the team is Kevin Coleman, who's just an absolute beast of a pilot. If you've seen him fly, it's just incredible. It hurts my brain watching him fly. The G-forces that he can withstand, it's just unbelievable. But those 2 guys, working with them is a huge privilege, and just seeing what they can do, and the sky's the limit to what you can come up with and what you can try. We've worked out our own moves that we believe are the first ones that people have done, and our teammates in Europe on the Flying Bulls do the same thing. So they've worked out some cool stuff that they do together, and it's just fun to work in an environment where once you're kind of on the team and once they give you the reins, then they allow you, and in some ways expect you to expand the boundaries of it. Here's this platform, here's all this support, go show us what you can do, and it's up to us to expand that, to go out and find new ways to entertain people, see what these aircraft will do, see what parachutes can do, see what wingsuits, just expanding the human experience. And it's really such a huge honor to be part of it, and to have the support of a company like that. It's privately held. There's Mr. Dietrich Mateschitz, the Austrian guy, runs the whole thing, owns it, him and his son, and they're just great people, and it really is a worldwide global family, and it really feels like it too. So it's a huge honor, huge privilege.
And what is the crew like? Like what makes up kind of going to air shows, getting the helicopter there to the show, maintenance, all those things?
So you'd think there's this huge team of people that do that, and there's not. When the helicopter travels around the country, it's me and my colleague Stan Gray. He's a helicopter pilot too. He and I travel the country together, and he'd be laughing right now because I'm implying that I fly the helicopter around the country with him, and I don't. He flies it all over the country. I generally take an airliner and meet him at the location of the show. Sometimes I fly with him, but it's pretty rare. He does all the work, and then I show up at the air show and do the air show and then leave. So I have to humbly admit that he does most of the work, and I pretty much have all the fun. But it's just he and I. And then of course we have contracted maintenance at our base in Los Angeles. We have a company that's been doing our maintenance since I took over the program in 2016. Those guys do an amazing job, and we have fortunately we're very well supported, so we can keep those aircraft in pristine condition at all times. And my belief is that if you have an older aircraft, and ours are older, they were built in 1982 and 1985, we have two of them, the health of the aircraft is getting better as we go. So they're in better condition now than they were when I took over, and they're just continually getting better. I like to put new parts, new components, whatever we can do to make those things top notch, we do it.
Do they require a fair amount of maintenance when you're not through home or going through your home base during the whole season?
Yes, we have all the same inspections and all the same maintenance program that anyone who operates a BO-105 or any helicopter for that matter. So it's all standard maintenance, and we do it all. We have some remote areas, places, one in Chicago, one in Shreveport, where we can do maintenance if we have to. And the answer is yes, we do a lot of maintenance on the road. We try to do all the heavy maintenance over wintertime. In the off season, we bring them both to Los Angeles and tear them down, and kind of refresh everything. We'll replace whatever components need to be replaced. If you get lucky, you can time all your maintenance for the winter off season, but it doesn't always work that way.
And you have too, because obviously it's a little difficult to at the speeds that helicopters fly to just do hey, Monday we're going to be in Los Angeles and Tuesday we're going to be in New York. So what's involved in managing two helicopters for shows?
So I mentioned my teammate Kevin Coleman. He owns his family, and he owned an FBO at Shreveport, Louisiana, which is northern Louisiana. So we have a remote base there. So during the season, when the show season starts in spring, Stan flies one of the helicopters out there, and then it stays out there for the whole season. We don't bring it home till October, November, after the last show on the East Coast or in the Midwest. Anything east of the Rockies, basically, we use that aircraft for those shows, and then we keep one on the West Coast. So you're right, it's impossible to do back-to-back shows in different corners of the country with one aircraft. So we have two. If we had to schedule a season to where we just hopped around and it made sense to do it with one helicopter, we would do that. But fortunately, we have two, and it works great that way. Gives us a little bit of redundancy and really helps us cover the country.
Does Stan ever does the helicopter wind up inverted on route?
Yeah, he's done some loops and rolls. Yeah. He doesn't do it en route. There's too much. We strip it down. We're not like Rich Lee. We don't fly it at mission weight when we do the display. So everything's out of it. It's completely empty. I go on super light fuel. And then when Stan's flying around the country, it's at pretty close to max gross weight when he takes off, because he's got a full bag of fuel and all of our equipment, tools, and everything else. So his job's a little different than mine.
One more thing back on the technical end, we hear a lot, especially for those of us that aren't helicopter gurus, about the fixed, the rigid rotor system. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that to people about the difference between that and how it makes all this possible?
Yes, it's not required that you have a rigid rotor system to do what we do, but that gives you a much wider performance envelope aerodynamically. So the rigid rotor system is perfect for what we do, and that's why the BO-105 is so well suited to it. And what we mean by a rigid rotor system is that the rotor head itself has no hinges. The three forces you need to absorb in the rotor head are flapping, lead lag, and feathering or pitch, right? So most rotor heads have hinges for that, or elastomeric bearings, or something that bends or turns or allows those things to happen. But the rigid rotor system All those forces, except for pitch, are absorbed in the blade itself. So the rotor head is rigid. There's no hinges, there's no bearings, nothing like that. So what it does then is the blades stay in plane. They don't flap around quite so much like they do in other helicopters. So there's no danger of striking the tail boom when you're inverted. You know, we actually do a maneuver where I'm upside down, descending in the inverted position, doing a pedal turn. And if you did that in a normal helicopter, the blades would flex down and you'd have a boom strike and chop your own tail boom off, which is really easy to do with some systems. But the rigid rotor system stays in plane no matter how you load it, from which direction, or, you know, how, positively, negatively, whatever you do, it stays in plane just like a wing. And that's what makes it perfect for what we do.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I want to make sure also that we understand a little bit about what you've got there with your family, because you have two sons that are pilots as well.
Yeah.
And and on their way to greatness in the same way. So tell me a little bit about your family and your kids.
Well, so the two sons you're talking about are Owen and Liam. Owen's 17. He's a private pilot and he's working on his instrument right now. He has decided that this is what he wants to do for a living. He wants to be a pilot. So he puts a lot of effort into it, a lot of studying, like all of us do when we're learning. He's going into his senior year in high school, and his goal is to finish the instrument and the commercial before he leaves high school. And he's on track for that. So he's looking really good on that end. And he's also flying aerobatics. I mentioned that we have a decathlon. So he's very, very fortunate. His situation's different than mine was. He was born into an aviation family, so he gets to drive over to the airport and go fly whenever he feels like it. And he does. And he flies aerobatics, and he's really good at it, but he's also, you know, really focused on the instrument stuff and getting all that done. But I got to brag a little bit. One thing that he did, which is super cool, and I like to shine a little bit of light on his first solo on his 16th birthday, we were all there, of course, and he's in the decathlon, and he went and he did his 3 takeoffs and landings, and then proceeded to take off again and flew to the aerobatic practice area and flew the sportsman's aerobatic routine on his first solo flight. So that was pretty cool. We're all really proud of him, really happy for him. And then his little brother, the other brother, is 16. That's Liam. He is a solo student right now, also flying the decathlon. He also does aerobatics. But he's just getting into the solo student part of it. He's not working on his instrument or anything like that yet. He's focused on the private. So aiming for that. He might do it on his 17th birthday, maybe not. You know, we've hit some milestones with the boys on their birthdays, but those aren't, you know, it's not set in stone. It's not a requirement. There's no pressure. They train at their own pace.
Oh man, that must be so cool. And I have not heard ever before the 3 takeoffs and landings, you got your solo, and then you head out and do an aerobatic routine. That is fantastic.
Not the first and only one to have done that, but I don't know too many others. I think Kevin Coleman did that. I'm sure somebody watching knows somebody who did that, but it doesn't happen very often. So we're pretty happy for him.
It's very cool. So I'm impressed. That is very cool.
Formation too. He's been trained. Well, I mentioned Kevin LaRosa earlier. He is one of the best formation pilots anywhere out there. You know, he shot Top Gun and all that. And Owen has been lucky to train with Kevin. So he's really getting some good instruction from some of the best in the game. So when you're on the radio and Owen keys up and says 2's in, you better be ready when you look over your shoulder, because he is right there.
Oh man, that is great. Well, Aaron, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, your evening, and joining us here on SocialFlight Live. I was thrilled to see you perform out at AirVenture and couldn't wait to have you here on the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was an honor to fly at Oshkosh too. I love that show.
Absolutely. So I hope we'll be talking to you again soon, and it's just great, everything that you're doing to kind of bring this and out to everybody else, and your passion that we've talked about that you have for getting more people involved in aviation that come from that background you mentioned, that like both of us, where we weren't born into aviation and you have to claw your way there. And I have a lot of respect for you for having done that and helping bring that to others.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, once you're in, it's a meritocracy. You know, the airplane doesn't care how rich you are or poor you are, how old or young you are. You just have to do it right. So there's room for everybody.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. And to all of you, thank you so much for taking time to join us from SocialFlight Live. And we will be back next Tuesday. We have a wonderful show with legendary NASA flight director and experimental aircraft builder and writer, Paul Dye. That is Tuesday, August 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Please be here for that show because it is going to be very, very special. On Tuesday, August 23rd, aerobatics performer Melissa Burns will be with us as she goes by, if you just want to look it up, it is Sports Gal. She is just so cool, an array of light, and it'll be wonderful to have her on the show as well. And then on Tuesday, August 30th, Boeing 737 educator, aviation mechanic, pilot, CFI, so many things to list, Melvin Williams will be joining us here on the show. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us here on Social Flight Live, and I wish you all blue skies.